Every episode celebrates original content written by real people who experience real emotions. I'm Rayanne Thorn Krueger. Welcome to Real Words. Mitch Joel is my guest today. Mitch is a speaker, has been an online writer for, I'm going to say decades. He can correct me if that's incorrect, but I'm pretty sure that's true. And a published author. Welcome, Mitch, to Real Words.
Good to see you, Rayanne. It's been a beat.
It's been a beat. I think the last time I saw you, we met for some drinks and dinner and conversation in downtown San Juan Capistrano, which is where I live now. So great to have you here. Thank you for joining me today. I'm very excited to talk to you about my list of questions, and I know that this is easy for you, and I can appreciate that. And maybe you can give us an intro of yourself, and then we'll jump right into what I want to talk about.
Sure. Well, happy to be here. I am now the founder of a new business called ThinkersOne, which helps companies buy bite-sized and personalized thought leadership from some of the best thought leaders in the world. I also have a podcast called 6 Pixels of Separation, which I've been publishing religiously every Sunday for 18 years, believe it or not. So it's a very long-running podcast. Also the name of my first book. Also the name of my blog. I don't know if it's called a blog or just a place where I post articles, but I've been doing that for close to 20 years. And I have a second book, Control of the Lead. Both books were published over a decade ago, so I'm very latent in coming out with anything new in terms of book format. And prior to that, I have a long career in media, communications, and advertising.
Well, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate you taking time out of your, I'm sure, very busy schedule. And I love the titles of your books. So before we jump into anything else, tell me, what is 6 Pixels of Separation?
I would love to take credit for it, but I was actually writing an abstract for a keynote presentation on how to build a personal brand. But this is in the early 2000s. So it was long before this was a thing. I was one of those people who was very early into social media and thinking about how we could use ourselves and have all these tools to broadcast. And here we are in this incredible world, a quarter of a century later. And I don't even remember what the title of it was, but I passed it by one of the copywriters at my agency at the time. And they had in the description written something about, we are no longer in a world of 6 degrees of separation. The concept created that any one of us is connected to any one of us in the world through less than 6 degrees, but we're now in this world of 6 pixels of separation. And I went, I like that.
I like it.
And so we changed the name of the blog at the time, maybe the podcast too, from the Twist Image blog, which was the name of our agency, to 6 Pixels of Separation. And it's just a term that I always loved. And even as we've evolved in social media and digital connections, I still love this idea that now we're all intrinsically connected, that we don't even need degrees anymore, that we're all a click away from one another. And I've just, it's the hill that I'm going to die on at this point, I think. I'm just sticking with it.
Longtime online writer. It's changed a bit since you first started writing. I can remember my first blog post on MySpace. That was the first place that I decided I'm going to try some online writing, and got a little traction there and really liked it and enjoyed the aspect of it being editable content and updatable content. I love that. So tell me about the transition from, so you've longtime published writer, 10 years, transition from being an online digital writer to writing an actual book.
Right. So the context for just digital writing for me goes prior to the social web. I was actually a publisher of music and entertainment magazines. And in the early 90s, it was probably 92, 93, we had a cover story on this new thing called the net, the internet.
Wow.
And the big innovation at the time was hyperlinks, the fact that you didn't have to type in each full URL for each individual web page, but you could link to other web pages through text. This was the innovation at the time. So I don't know if we were one of the first, but we could have been one of the first publishers to actually be putting like text-based content on the internet. So even before you could edit it. So once social channels came in, I got very, very excited. So the blog takes off and it's doing very well, and it's somewhat unique in the place it's in. But being a journalist by trade and someone who had published magazines, I always thought that the book was Moby Dick. It was this whale, and all I had was a fork and some tartar sauce. But I knew I wanted to someday write a book about something. Again, coming from the music entertainment business, I'd always thought it would be something like that, ghostwriting or co-writing someone's biography, what have you. And then through the miracle of these connected technologies, I started a podcast. And one of the podcasts I did was an adjunct one for HarperCollins. It was called Forward Thinking, where I was interviewing HarperCollins authors. One of those authors happened to be Dan Ariely, who became very famous for his book, Predictably Rational. But this was before the book had come out, months and months before. I read the book and thought, amazing, I should get him on my podcast. And he agreed to do it. And he was the one who thought, oh, I should introduce you to my literary agent in New York. And I thought, as one does being a Canadian person, that's the same as like an LA, hey, we should do lunch. Like, sure, go ahead, do it. Let's see if it happens. But he legitimately did. And I found myself in Manhattan meeting with the literary agent who loved the title 6 Pixels of Separation, loved the content, thought I was somebody who could definitely deliver a book on that topic. At the time, it was very germane and in the zeitgeist. He walked me into several publishers, and sure enough, Grand Central Hachette was the one that was really interested. Hat tip to Rick Wolf, who's gone on, who's actually passed away fairly recently. He was a great guy, a great human being, and he just couldn't let go. He just really wanted the book. So we agreed to do 6 Pixels of Separation, and then that did well. So we wanted to do a second book, Control Alt Delete, which we did a couple of years after that. And my thinking was very primal at the time. I was running a digital marketing agency, trying to convince businesses why they should embrace digital and all the channels that they offer. And I just felt the best way to reach many of these CEO executive types would be in the format they're most accustomed to, which is they're going to be walking through an airport and probably run into this book, and maybe the title will spark their imagination. And that was the idea. I just saw it, one as a really interesting channel to business development and to put my thinking out into the world. And then secondarily, there was this selfish aspect of it where I just always wanted to publish a book. And here I was in a world where I had now met one of the most respected literary agents in the world in terms of nonfiction business books, who signed me, was interested, who got me a global deal with one of the largest book publishers in the world, with the senior most editor who had done Rich Dad, Poor Dad and other massive books. Who am I to say no to such opportunity, Rayanne?
Right.
So I just capitalized on it, and I thought it would be a fun thing for us to do. And it turned out to be a great experience for sure.
So one of the things that I want to get to in a little bit is technology and its impact on writing, on producing original content. But before we get there, I want to ask you about a quote that as I was looking up about you and reading about you, a quote that you shared, probably have shared multiple times at different conferences, because you are also a prolific speaker, public speaker. You speak at events and are sought after for that. Technology has removed technology from technology.
Yeah, I haven't used that one in a while. That's why I laughed a little bit. Right. The idea was that for many people, probably closer to my age, the idea was technology was always this hurdle. For those who remember the blinking time on their
Yes.
VHS, for those who think about always using their kids as tech support or IT because the printer doesn't work or the computer crashed or the software doesn't work. We hit an inflection point at the time. I had probably said this, where we needed to get over that hurdle, because the truth is that tools like the iPhone and other social tools we had fundamentally removed the technology from the technology. This fear that we have that it's this hurdle, we have to sit down and spend time with it, we have to learn how to use it.
I
Yeah.
have to. Somebody has
Very
to teach
intuitive.
me. Yes.
Pick it up and swipe left or right, and it's
Right.
easier to use than anything you could imagine. And that was really maybe a quote more of the times than it is of now. But that's just been proliferated at scale is the only thing I would say about that quote. But it's nice to hear, because I haven't said it or thought of that in probably 15 years.
I also liked you said, don't confuse destruction with disruption.
Yeah, that's more modern.
And well, I think all of us that have been doing this for a while, anybody that's been in business the last 20 years has seen a lot of destruction that was called disruption. And now, if you're an artist in any way, if you write music, if you produce music, if you are a writer, whatever type of writing you do, whether you write books or online digitally, or you write screenplays or plays, or anything that requires you to think, or if you produce art or are a photographer, we are at I'm going to use your term, a flexion point. We're at a new flexion point where is AI going to be disruptive or destructive when it comes to creating original content? So
Yeah.
I want to hear your thoughts about that.
Disruption's in the eye of the beholder at this point. You could look at this and think, well, that's completely destructive because it can be, or it can be simply disruptive, which is this opportunistic place where we can take and learn from it. So, as a writer, I can tell you that I have been neck deep forever in all of these generative AI tools. And I'm at the point where I have trained and reinforced learning with my own bots to a place where I am almost an editor slash ghostwriter for Mitch bot versus Mitch. I can give it the prompts I require for it to do the preliminary work for me to clean it up and then edit it and add maybe a bit of sarcasm or joke here and there. But that's where we're at. And I don't see this as a destructive force. I actually see it as a really creative place for me where I'm able to create a lot more because I'm in a place where I'm not staring at the blank screen or not sure of the structure or where it could go, or toying with things that aren't necessarily in the place that I feel I'm best suited to give my energy or strength towards. And so I love it for that. And it's been really amazing, especially in terms of some of the grunt work when it comes to creating keyword lists for me, when it comes to just doing cleanups of biographies or to do a quick summary, which is work that I have to do to complement the actual core writing that I do, or even coming up with opposing perspectives. I might think I've got this right perspective on this trend that's happening, and having a bot that thinks like me, that I've trained through, again, reinforcement learning and beyond, to have it give me opposing perspectives as a media theorist has been really helpful in the work that I do. So I look at all of these tools and think, thank you. I don't know what I would do without them. Not that I couldn't write or exist without them, but I appreciate what they've done to add value to my life and add value to my creativity versus thinking I could build a prompt and just have it do an article. And I do think that that is true. So I worry very seriously about young up and comers because I do believe that their work traditionally in the copywriting space can definitely be abdicated to a GPT 4.0. Absolutely.
Right.
So there is a reality of that. But as a general view, I think it's more disruptive than destructive. The question is, how much disruption can we handle as a society? What level of unemployment are we talking about? Or are we looking at jobs and tasks that we've traditionally been offsetting to a younger junior writer that maybe that work doesn't need to be done by anybody? And so this is the big problem, the paradox of generative AI right now, which is we have to be able to look at it and understand that it's disrupting the knowledge worker. Writers, creators, photographers, videos, were knowledge workers. And we always thought up until not that long ago, a couple months, oh, you could never have a computer do this work. And suddenly it's able to do this work. And so we have to reflect, where am I adding value? What is the most value I could add? How do I do that with these tools? How do I use it to complement the work that I'm doing? I believe that there are boundless new opportunities that will be created, and you have to find yourself in that space to figure out what is the work you want to do. There's always going to be purists who just want to do the writing, and I do think that those people will both be disrupted and also need to figure out what is a different path in a world where it may not be as traditional as nothing else is creating words but writers, to a world where everybody can create some level of work with. And again, out of the box, it's not creating anything that's all that impressive or interesting. But I can tell you that through some basic training with somebody who is a writer, it's able to do some really impressive things.
So, as a writer, as somebody who has produced 2 books pre generative AI, when you consider this next whale you need to get, how is it going to be different for you?
I don't know that it will be because I don't necessarily know that I'm in the headspace where I want to produce and publish another book, only because I really struggle with book sales, what books mean in our society now more than ever. And again, I'm somebody who reads 1 to 2 books a week. I love them. I interview authors on my podcast all the time. I'm fascinated by it. But if I think about the actual value for someone like me in a world where I am doing a lot of radio and a lot of content creation, a lot of podcasting, a lot of articles, a lot of posts on LinkedIn, whatever it might be, I don't know that there is the need for the time and concentration for me personally to create a book. Also, even the publishing world has changed. Advances are not what they were when I did my book deal. A lot of people are self-publishing or doing hybrid publishing. I'd also challenge you to say, look at the world. Think about the biggest business book ideas we've seen. So the big ones might be The Subtle Art by Mark Manson. It might be something like Atomic Habits. Those books aren't new. They're fairly old, actually. They've been out multiples of years and still rank in the top of the bestsellers lists. We've been through a global pandemic. The entire way we work has fundamentally changed. And you're telling me no other book has been able to break the zeitgeist and have that type of impact, whether it's a tipping point like book? We haven't seen it. And I do sit back in awe of that and wonder, why is it that in this world, we haven't had a book that has resonated at that level in a world where we have totally changed how we think about work and how we operate, which makes me question the value of business books in terms of how we look at content or create content. So I'm not dismissive of it. I read them. I just haven't seen one that has moved me or propelled me like that. And I don't think the market has either, based off of the bestsellers list. And that's a provocation we should all think about as people who want to publish a book or put an idea out there. Is it worth it? What does the landscape look like? Why are you doing this? Where's the value in it? And ultimately, is there a consumer? Is there a reader at the end of all that work?
Right. Well, that's the basic part of being a marketer, an advertiser. What's the ultimate result that you're trying to get from this? Ultimately, you want somebody to change or learn or buy. If you're a marketer, you want them to buy your tale that you're telling. And so if there's not a market or a place for that to land, what do you do?
Yeah, but you also had a world where publishers took chances. And I recognize the model because it's similar to the music business. You have a lot of massive hits, and those fund the other authors like me, where they're going to throw a bunch of stuff at a wall and see what sticks. But in this world where the economics have changed so dramatically and readers have changed so dramatically, you're not seeing those chances being taken. So because you lose the editorial layer, you're seeing more and more people do things like hybrid deals or self-publishing, which don't require a heavy bar to come over. In fact, a lot of these people are using things like generative AI tools to create the content as well. So again, I'm not being hypocritical. It's just when those filters and editors and that money is gone from the industry, perhaps that's the reason why we don't see those massive, big, amazing, not just bestsellers, but books that really change the way we think about, in particular, business and work that we do. So when that model changes, it's a bit stranger. And when the model is shortened, or the bar to hop over to do this is so low, you don't even need to publish books. You could do it on demand. You could just write a book today, publish it tomorrow on Amazon, and then have it published on demand. And that can work. So yes, you are an author, but it's a very different model than the world where you had editors and publishers, and when should books
Right.
come out, and how do they come out? What do they look like? So the models change. That's fine. I'm okay with this disruption as my topic. It's the thing I love most. I just don't know, for me, if the value model is there in terms of effort against result.
That makes sense. So, having grown up basically in the music industry, how do you think generative AI will impact musicians and artists?
I think the tools are going to keep getting better. So the ones who believe, oh, it's just taking some historical information and guessing of the next letter or the next, yeah, it is doing that, but the result is already very impressive. So I don't care if it's faking it or if it's a real artificial intelligence, the result is still really good. Meaning that when I input something, the output I get is typically, I think, a better first strike than I would be able to produce. So what happens is you have more creators being able to create things. That creates a lot more content. It creates a lot more disruption in the sense of how do we find and filter through this content. But I do believe that in that process, you also find a lot of gems. And that's always what we're looking for, is the gems, the things that resonate with us. So I don't know, I could care less if somebody uses generative AI tools to create things like music, as long as it strikes a chord in me, as long as it means something to me. My joke, and I think I heard it originally from Sarah Silverman, the comedian, she said something like, I don't judge my ear holes. And I always love that line. I think about that a lot because there's a lot of songs that are on my forever playlist, meaning songs that I never tire of. I could listen to a million times. And other people might think those are complete cheeseball tunes that are terrible. I don't judge what I like, what I don't like. So if generative AI can come up with something that moves me, I'm down for it as much as I would be as if you came up with something that moves me. I'm not so precious with this idea that humans are the sole relegation of creativity.
Interesting. Okay.
I do think that these generative AI tools have proven that even in their more simplistic form, they can be extremely impressive. So when something's impressive, I'm able to acknowledge it, look at it, and think, okay, am I trying to beat it? Am I trying to join it? Am I okay if it replaces me? It might. I mean, we could very well get to the point where MitchBot is a better writer and has better ideation than I can in my clouded, busy, little simple human brain. The challenge with this is we have egos, and our egos would like us to think that all of the work we did to build some type of advanced degree, or all the hours we've toiled away on a keyboard coming up with the perfect prose, are somehow perhaps unique to us. And my big illumination through these generative AI tools has been maybe not. And maybe that's what we need to think about.
It's almost like the streams are crossing of the right and the left brain, right? Because for so many millennium, we've had artists and scientists, right? And now that those streams are crossing. So it'll be interesting to see what the next 5 years brings when we consider what the last 5 years. We used to say what the next 10 years and 20 years, but now it's shortened. But that time span is shortened.
Yeah, I think it's actually a couple of months. I just think about what makes somebody creative. It's your inspiration. What makes us unique is other people acknowledging this taste, this flair that we have. Well, now you have these systems that are taking in more inputs than we ever could, can hold them and handle them all at an equal level, and then based off of an input, output at a much greater speed, that type of thing that we would do while picking and choosing in our own brains and emotionals and where we're feeling at the time. I just look at it like a losing proposition. It's like the calculator is going to always be quicker and more accurate than I will at the addition, multiplication, subtraction, and division. Perhaps the generative AI tools will be easier and better to find what I was looking for because they're able to access more and output it more. I don't know, but it's looking more and more impressive.
We might dumb down society because instead of thinking it out and hashing it out in our own brains or writing it down, we just have to ask or push a button.
Could be. It could be, but how do we stop that? And even if we could stop it, would we stop it? I don't necessarily see that as a positive or negative. The analogy I use for it is it's like fire. The advent of fire changed who we are as human beings and allowed us to thrive and thrive for centuries. But it's also the thing that can burn down your home and cause a great amount of damage. It's how we use it. And typically when we have these dramatic shifts in humanity in terms of development or innovation or invention, that's how we have to look at it. We can look at it and go, well, it can kill us all, or it can take us to a whole new level. I think what we do as a society is going to be the most telling aspect of it.
For sure. I just remember being told when I had made this major purchase of a Palm Pilot, we're not going to use it anymore. My boss coming in and saying, we're going to switch to Outlook, and then we're not going to use Blackberries anymore. We're going right to smartphones. So there's always going to be innovation. This just feels like it's the soul. The soul is being innovated now.
Yeah, it's disrupting what we do, and that's the challenge. Yeah. That's just what it is. It's disrupting knowledge work. And if you said to me, like, what type of knowledge work is look, a lot of very senior people who have very advanced degrees come to work every day because they have historical work that they can replicate for different types of clients. The challenge with that is if your work is quite repetitive, even though you're doing it uniquely for these sets of other groups and you charge a lot of money, AI likes to eat that stuff for breakfast. Yeah. So it's going to force a new level of originality, a different type of thinking, a divergent way of thinking, an emergent way of thinking for all of us to figure out where the innovation lies.
I like that. So there is opportunity to still be original, to still be creative, to still dig deep and do something different, something new that no one's ever done before.
Always. I think that's the human spirit for sure.
So as a speaker, and I know you're pretty prolific at this, when you are coming up with, now because I know some speakers, they put together one particular speech a year or one per season. Right. Do you tailor that for a specific group? Do you come up with something new each time? How do you select your content for a new speaking gig?
I work really differently than most speakers, but as I tell the story, I feel like more speakers are working this way, which I think is great.
Yeah.
I've been speaking professionally for close to 2 decades now, like with representation, meaning I really only speak when my agents come to me and say, hey, this is the date, this is the place, can you go? What I've done historically is every day I'm just consuming content. I consider myself an infovore. And as I find things that I like, I build a slide for it. Very remedial, nothing crazy, just a slide as a placeholder. And over the years, I've accumulated thousands of slides. So am I going back and using thousands of slides in a 50-minute keynote? I am not. It's typically the same amount of slides, usually somewhere in the 40 to 50 range, depending what I'm doing. But it forces me to always be thinking about where things are going, what might be the opportunities, what are the business models. So is it a standard keynote? I think it is. Is it constantly being updated and changed and tweaked? I think it is. Are there stories within the keynote that can then be expanded to be a full keynote on their own? They are. Like, for example, the whole topic of AI has become its own full, robust keynote
Right.
that I'm very excited and happy to give. So I don't think of it as, is it an hour and is it the same thing? I'm constantly rotating. In fact, I'll often go back at the end of the year and look at where I started with my master deck and then see where I am and be one, amazed at how much it's changed. But at the same time, even a slide that hasn't changed, the story that I told has changed. It's almost like I tried it out on stage and something came out and I thought, oh, that's actually better. And I just kept repeating that and I had forgotten what had happened before.
Right.
So I work as, I would say, it's iterative. Then the other aspect of my
Okay.
work, because of what I do professionally, what I did do professionally, especially the agency life, which I had for, again, close to 18 years, you're exposed to so many businesses, B2B, B2C, small, medium, large, entrepreneurial, different industries. So I know enough in those arenas to be dangerous. I know if it's B2B, we want to talk about clients, not customers. If I'm working in the pharma space, I've had multiple pharma clients, so I know what to say, or in the real estate industry. So I know enough to speak the jargon a little bit. And then, yeah, if I have the opportunity to think about what's the ask for the keynote, what's the industry, can I provide more value? I do. I'm very cautious. I'll be honest with you, because I'm very cautious of customizing only because I'm not the expert in that industry. And I feel like we have many of
Okay.
our peers who like follow a client on Google Alerts and then go in and show them all the things happening in their industry. And I personally take it as a bit insulting. They're really smart people. They know what they're
Right.
doing. They're very successful.
Right.
My job is to come in there as a third party and show them the areas of my expertise that either they don't know about or want to know more about. So I don't think about customizing it in terms of making sure that I'm following their industry so much as showing them maybe even other industries that are doing things that might be applicable to what they're doing. And I don't necessarily know. So I'm always apologizing on stage, as I'm not the subject matter expert in your industry, but I am in mine. And let me show you my world, and hopefully you can make the collisions and connections yourself.
That kind of answers my question, which how do you make sure that a message that you've curated over the years that it will land with your audience? What do you
Yeah.
feel yourself sometimes on stage shuck and jive as you have to, oh, maybe that's not working? I mean, you just shared
Yeah.
an
I mean,
experience where you changed on stage.
yeah, it's possible. It's not like a comedian where they either laugh or they don't. It's hard to know, and every audience is so different when you speak in terms of just who's in the audience, the industry you're serving, the mood of the day. I usually find that it works because we've done enough work on the pre-call of understanding who they are, who the audience is, what's happening, that even if I zig and zag a little bit, I'm still in the realm of knowing what the scaffolding is around what we discussed. So I don't have it where things have bombed or died. I had it in the earlier part of my career, and I think a lot of that was just ego and me being like, I know this, let me show you things, versus as you get older, I think there's a humility that comes out,
Sure.
and a calmness too, in terms of just my delivery, what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to create a brand and be famous or pop. That's not at all what I'm after. What I'm after is the idea that I think I'm really strong in business meetings. I think I'm really strong, whether it's a customer summit or a corporate event. I think I'm really good in those avenues of helping them feel like they learn something about where the world is going in terms of technology and business models, that there's a value. And I just see myself in that role versus trying to be the 10 out of 10 speaker. And what's the rating that they really laugh? I want them to be smarter. I want them to have felt openness and a connection, and really given them some space to think really dramatically about not just their industry and their company, but the work that these individuals do day in and day out, and how much they're thinking about the world and how it's changing.
Do you have any advice for aspiring writers or an aspiring podcaster or speaker?
The only thing I would say, which is, it's a recent realization that I've known that I am communicating more to my peers, which is, don't diminish the skill set. I always was wondering, like, am I really a good speaker? Am I really a good writer? But when I actually deal with other people who are trying to write and trying to speak, I realize I actually am. It's not ego. It's just experience and work. And why I say that is that it's not ego is what I mean is I'm being more respectful of the fact that I'm realizing, you know what, to get up and speak in front of an audience is not easy. To have an idea in a world where ideas are everywhere, but come up with something unique in how you write and communicate and share that, it's not easy. And that what makes it easy, what makes it look easy is all of the work that people like me and people like you put into it. So I love getting that comment of, you look so comfortable on stage. One is, I'm not comfortable on stage, but two is, it's a resounding check mark to me knowing that the work I have put in comes off that way. And so in a world where everybody thinks they can be a writer or a speaker, I know that I'm doing the job if that's the feeling someone gets. It's actually amazing that someone thinks that, like, oh, I could do what he does. It looks so easy. Perfect.
Well, do you think you were born to do this, or
no? No. I don't. I think about this a lot. That I have friends who are in insurance or friends who sell different products and services. Do you think they woke up and thought, I'd like to grow up to sell squat racks, or I'd like to grow up and sell insurance, but only to B2B companies that are in this? It's like, I don't think any of us really believe. We all think we're going to be firemen, models, professional athletes, musicians, and then we wind up in these other jobs. What I do think I can recognize in this things I did as a young person was this desire to want my ideas to be heard, a desire to want to have some type of teaching in a different way. I never liked formal education, but teaching in that way. I can see sediments of the things I really liked as a young person in the work that I do and that I'm actually good at. But ultimately, it's a craft. And the craft only works because you do it day in and day out, and you're just constantly
it's been honed,
sawing
it's
at that.
Perfected, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And I know I'm not the best at it. I don't claim to be. I just know that I'm putting in enough hours and work against it where people look at it and think it's natural and think they can do it. That to me is becoming the new waking up for writers and speakers and content creators. And if people look at your work and think, I could do that, it means you're doing it really well, probably.
That's good. That's good. If it looks easy, it means you're doing it really well.
Yeah.
My guest today has been the incomparable Mitch Joel of ThinkersOne.com. If you want to learn more about what he does, head over to that website. Sounds like he releases a podcast a week. A lot of writing, a lot of podcasting still. And I love what you brought to the table here about generative AI. I'm going to go back and listen to it and write about it. I really appreciate your insight. You've been doing this a while.
So great seeing you. Hopefully we can have a meal out in the open again.
That would be great.
Soon.
That would be great. Thank you so much, Mitch. I appreciate you joining me today on Real Words.
Thanks, Rayanne. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for tuning in. This episode was made possible by Never Enough Media.